Hey guys, we're here to continue our conversation we started last Friday on Senate Bill 474. Does anybody need Alexis to explain the bill again, or do you want to just? Well, we did that last Friday. Okay, just Alexis, just for the benefit of the folks back home, just maybe a brief synopsis of the bill, and then we've got to take up some potential amendments. Okay.
All right. So the bill exempts from the CPCN requirement through the PSC on-site backup generation.
Public service. We've got the umpire on acronyms here. So
CPCN means Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity. PSC refers to the Public Service Commission. So these on-site backup generators would be exempt from that requirement if they are used for the purpose of emergency backup and test and maintenance, and are also subject to permits to construct from the Department of the Environment.
Okay, and just first of all, this is a bill from the governor, and so we do have the governor's team here. Safe and Eric, why don't you just come up to the table, because this is a governor's bill, and therefore, to the extent there's questions, I think it's good to have you guys here. So that said, we've got basically in your packet essentially three separate sets of amendments. There's amendments that I'm proffering, and essentially these are, I would characterize as the governor's amendments, but they're under my name. We've got Senator Lewis Young has an amendment, and then we've got Senator Hester has a sequence of amendments. So in terms of just process here, any questions about the bill or about anything before we take up these amendments for discussion or votes? Okay, that said, the amendments, why don't we just start with the amendments under the chair's name and describe them? And it's in the reprint, so the reprint incorporates the amendments. So why don't you review the first reprint there, which starts on what page whatever. I'll turn it to you, Alexis. Why don't you explain?
All right, so pages 1 through 6 are the chair's amendments incorporated in the reprint. Then there are 4 behind it. We covered the chair's amendments when we last kind of discussed the bill. But to run through them again, these amendments make the backup generators exempt only if the purpose of the generator is for emergency backup and testing and operations, specifically when electric service by the electric company is interrupted due to grid failure or transmission disruptions, or equipment failure at a site where critical infrastructure is located. Critical infrastructure is defined to include a data center as well as a hospital. The generator has to be installed at a facility that is part of critical infrastructure only if the facility complies with noise and testing regulations. Requires the generator owners to submit a yearly report to the Maryland Department of the Environment on the frequency of the use of each generator. Requires Maryland Energy Administration to consult with the Department of Commerce to submit a report beginning in 2025 and every 2 years thereafter on backup generation technologies and their evolution. So that's pages 1 through 6, our first set to consider.
Okay, questions for Alexis or for Mr. Lukey or his deputy? Safe here? Yes, Vice Chair Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Alexis, the annual reports to the Maryland Department of the Environment, will that be available to the public? Would it be shared with the legislature, or is that confidential because of the nature of some of these issues? And if Mr. Lutke or Mr. Ratul know that quickly, if you guys have copies of the bill?
So Eric, one part of it.
Do you need this?
So the part that's required to the Department of the Environment is not required to go to the General Assembly. However, it's talking about information about the testing of the generating unit. So yes. I'm not sure if that would be exempt for the purposes of national security. When the facility was used, how often it was tested. So that may not fall into a cybersecurity exemption, but MDE would be able to develop regs to kind of foreclose that data from the public. The report that is submitted to the Maryland Energy Administration every 2 years, beginning in 2025, that one is required to go to the General Assembly. So that one will absolutely be public. And that's on the technology of backup generation. but how often they were used doesn't explicitly require it to come to the General Assembly.
Did you guys want to
That's
add
the question.
anything on this issue?
So these reports are not public for a number of reasons that Alexis has put forth, but if needed, we can make those available to General Assembly members as well.
Okay, well, does that have to be in the bill? I mean, it's one thing to make it are you suggesting modifying this to say it in here? I would say that, okay, what you raised this issue. How important is this for, okay.
Our expert might.
Okay, Senator Hester.
I mean, so I was just saying, not all data centers will be matters of like national security. But we do redact, anything that has cybersecurity implications from our public reports. So it was unclear to me, whether or not this would qualify. But I think, I tend to err on the side of, it would be nice for us to actually get a copy of the report if we needed it.
Okay, well, what else?
So I'll just say two things on that. I think the biggest issue in terms of security is with the report that specifically goes to MDE. We're talking 2 reports here, the latter of which goes to MEA that will be publicly accessible, which may not have as many implications for national security because that's just talking about how to improve backup generation technology. A recommendation, if the will of the body, is to make parts of these reports to MDE publicly accessible, with the exception of certifiable national security concerns, is to just insert report or make a publicly accessible report. If you could add those 2 words into that language.
That would make sense to me if you guys can look at that. And I'm okay with some redaction, I'm okay with something, but I think to the degree that we can have something that's more transparent.
Yeah, I think we're comfortable with that. The other thing that doesn't impact national security as much is aggregated data as well.
So Alexis, I don't know whether you said 2 words. Could you just indicate where? I don't know if we are at the point, Mr. Chair, I assume we are, that we want to get in the weeds and not just do I trust you to come up with the right words. How do you want to do
So
that?
subject to change per review, but I'm looking at page 5,
Yes.
section 7207.3.
Yes.
On or before December 1, 2025, and each December 1 thereafter, owner or operator of a generating unit specified under shall submit to the Department of the Environment a publicly accessible report. So before report, publicly accessible. Another point of concern is whether we want to insert something along the lines of, and these words are probably going to change, but subject to approval by MDE or subject to being redacted if there's a national security issue, something along those lines. That
I'm okay
will
with the
be tightened up.
concept of whatever that is,
Yeah.
if colleagues are,
Yeah.
and the governor's folks are.
That we would support that.
Okay, so let's hold on to that because we want to, before we do anything, let's just field some questions. Senator Lewis Young, on this issue or a separate issue?
No, this issue.
Okay,
Oh, no, not this issue.
okay, well, okay, then let's just let's just take this one at a time. Do you want to make a motion to
Sure.
do exactly that?
So on page 5, after line 24, in the 4th line of the first paragraph, under A, 7207.3A, inserting a publicly accessible, and again, if there are words about redaction or national security or safety or cyber, I'm okay with that. But the concept of that, so whether it's, I don't know, that's not a very good motion, but the concept of that, Alexis, that is my motion. Yes. At the bottom, Senator Carozza, after line 24, there's a section 7-207.3. And A talks about a report to MDE, the Maryland Department of the Environment. So we just want it to be publicly accessible to the degree that it's appropriate.
Okay, any further on this proposed amendment?
Needs a second.
We need a second. It's your second, Senator Washington. And let me just say, we wordsmith this when if this bill passes, which we haven't passed it yet, and it gets to the floor and needs a tweak, we can always show up with a floor amendment. So, I think we have the idea. Okay, you've got a motion, a second from Senator Washington. Any further discussion on this few word adjustment? Okay, all in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, that motion carries and that amendment is on here. Okay, Senator Lewis Young, back to the Feldman amendments.
Yes, I have a question on page 4.
Okay, here, let's talk process. Yes.
Should we not get the amendment before us if we're gonna be talking about the amendment?
Okay, you mean, okay, legitimate process point.
Yeah.
Okay, since we're talking about amendments, nobody's actually moved the amendments, so I
Yeah.
think properly, I'm going to move the amendments. Is there a
I'll
second?
second.
Okay, so now those amendments that are
Okay.
incorporated in the reprint are in front of us. Thank you, Senator Augustine. Okay, so now, Senator Lewis Young, we're back on these amendments.
Thank you. So I have some concerns about the hours of testing. And I'm not sure that this speaks specifically for this. For example, the Quantum Loophole campus, when it's built out, 13 facilities, let's say on the average, 168 diesel generators. They have to be tested once a month. So 73 generators will be tested a day. So on page 4, number 2, section 4 is installed at a facility that is part of critical infrastructure if the facility complies with all applicable regulations regarding noise level and testing hours. Where do those regulations for testing hours come from?
Senator
Do-
Lewis Young, I'm sorry, you said page 4?
Yes. It's labeled page 4 at the bottom.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
My point is I want to make sure that that testing of potentially 73 plus generators aren't during peak hours. And I'm not sure this addresses it, but where is it addressed? Do we need to address it?
So all would, rely on local, state, and federal, right? If there's regulatory authority at any of those levels. EPA and their regulations, I'm not certain if they mandate these data centers to conform to peak hours. I'm not sure the level of specificity, but if there is a local zoning ordinance that does, right, that is specific to noise, that would be covered here. So it may be context depending on where it's located, and the overlap between federal, local, and state.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for Alexis, for the two folks at the panel in the governor's office? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion and a second on the table. Mario, why don't we take a roll call on these amendments?
All right, Senator Kagan.
Clarifying, this is now the Feldman Amendment, the first 6 pages
Yes,
with the publicly accessible amendment and nothing from anyone else.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
We're going to take those up separately. So
Thank
that's what's in front of us.
Thank you.
All right, Senator Kagan.
Aye.
Senator Kagan, yes. Senator Augustine.
Yes.
Senator Augustine, yes. Senator Gallion.
Yes.
Senator Gallion, yes. Senator Watson.
Yes.
Senator Watson, yes. Senator Lewis Young.
Yes.
Senator Lewis Young, yes. Senator Brooks.
Yes.
Senator Brooks, yes. Senator Carozza.
Yes.
Senator Carozza, yes. Senator Hester.
Yes.
Senator Hester, yes. Senator Washington.
Yes.
Senator Washington, yes. Senator Simonaire.
Okay, those
Senator
amendments,
Simonaire, yes.
yes, from the chair, that those amendments carry unanimously. Let's next take up some amendments proposed by Senator Lewis Young. I think okay, or do you want, okay, let's go to Senator Hester and then we'll go to Senator Lewis Young. Senator Hester?
Okay, I just, with the amendments, I wanted to have just a conversation first. And so the first one, is on page, well, it starts on page 7. And basically, this would establish a Sustainable Development Center task force And it lists members, of which I've been informed one is missing. And then but basically the point of the task force, would be to, study best practice in things like climate and the environment, public health, electric distribution system, identifying existing potential mechanisms to encourage that we get the most sustainable data centers to come to the state of Maryland. So I had a really good conversation with Eric Lukey in the governor's office. After I drafted this amendment, you all should have received a letter from me that would, with Eric's signature on it. And I just wanted to invite you to describe kind of what's in the letter and what your intentions are going forward.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Senator. I think there's a shared interest in ensuring both that we have the economic growth that data centers can provide and the anchoring for our technology industries that they will provide, and for ensuring that Maryland's data centers are best in class, using the best possible technology, using innovative processes. We believe, in line with the suggestion in your amendment, that there is a conversation to be had. So the administration is committed to stakeholder consultations, a consultative process modeled on the Frederick County process, which recently reached its conclusion, and undertaking that pretty much as soon as session ends. Our preference for that over the amendment is because with the amendment, then you are subject to the appointments process, and the work group would not be able to start meeting until later in the summer. So we'd rather start the conversation sooner about how to incentivize creative thinking about the industry and how we ensure that we have the most sustainable possible industry.
And so, Senator Young pointed out that I had missed an important stakeholder group, which was the environmental community in my amendment, and that was totally a mistake. So will your consultation process involve the environmental community?
Yes, we've already committed that to groups that are active in the environmental community.
Okay.
Has environmental advocacy groups.
Oh,
On page 9, you've got 2 representatives already on here.
okay, great. But anyways, I mean, I think this is super important. I think it's, and I think speed is of the essence. I think when I was looking at the incentives, colleagues, for attracting data centers in other states, many other states and other countries have said, hey, we'll give you this much incentive if you use best available technology. We'll use this much incentive if we give you, if you, sign up with, REX or something like that. And so I think, really trying to attract, I mean, these data centers are coming anyways, right? And so we want the ones that are committed to, good jobs, good local development, ones that are committed to working with the community. And so I think, I will take the administration on its, on its word. And I really look forward to working and potentially serving on this great forthcoming working group.
Yeah, you're definitely going to incorporate her on that work group, right, Mr. Lukey? I want to get you on the record.
Absolutely, sir.
Okay. And Senator Washington?
I guess I was just going to ask, I was going to speak for the amendment, but if you're withdrawing it, then I don't need to.
Yeah, let's move on.
Well,
Oh, wait.
we just haven't, thank you.
I would
So-
not come over it, but I would very
Yeah.
much like to hear what the senator has.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Senator Washington?
Yeah, I was just going to say that you could do both, like, could you have it installed, but also it wouldn't keep the administration from starting the conversation right away. In other words, the only thing about codifying it is that then it's an ongoing thing, and, you could certainly have a starting date, later, so that because I think the intention is that there's a constant group that's always sort of looking at these things. So the start date could be later, it doesn't have to be now. So you could do your initial group without, having to abide by these rules. I mean, not being held up by this legislation, but yeah, you could do both, in other words. So that's why I was speaking that you could do both. Put this in as well as do what the governor wants to do.
Okay, well, I think, I think Mr. Lukey and the governor's team, I think, have made a representation, and I think we should just go with that rather than incorporating that in statute and codifying. I don't think it's necessary. So that's just my opinion. Senator Hester, do you want to press your amendments or not?
For this one, I think I take them at their word. We'll be here in a year if it's not, if the working group isn't satisfactory.
Okay, so,
Chair?
yes, Vice Chair Kagan.
If this is going to be a guideline for the governor and his folks, if I can just, I have a question and a comment. One, there are 3 representatives from MACO, the Maryland Association of Counties, urban, suburban, and rural. That makes sense. But out of 157 cities and towns of all sizes, shapes, and capacities, there's only 1 MML representative. So I'd like to suggest that increased representation by munis would make sense. And so I guess that's the comment. The question that I have is on page 9. You've got the PSC providing staff, and then the governor may provide money to the PSC to hire a consultant. There's something a little odd to me that we're bypassing PSC with the CPCN, and then we're going to make them the top dogs in evaluating how it's going. So I just want to flag that. And then also the may fund it. If the governor chooses not to fund it, they're somehow going to come up with the funding for a consultant. I know that we're doing mays and not shalls, but this is pretty important. So again, it's in your lane and we're not going to wordsmith this, but just want to flag that for your consideration.
Appreciate the flag, Senator.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, that said, we're not considering this amendment. We're going to move to the final amendment on the table from Senator Lewis Young. Alexis, why don't you describe? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I apologize. Yes, my apologies. Back to Senator Hester. Yes.
Okay. The second one starts on page 14 of your packet. And, I think in keeping with, improving government processes, and my kind of wanting to fix the process, what this amendment would do is it basically says that anything over 70 megawatts would basically go through a separate CPCN process. And I was thinking about this kind of like the fast track at the airport. Like because you're a little bit different or you got a little more money, you go through an expedited process. And I do feel like there is room for shortening the timelines. And actually, I think this would be good to do for like everybody who goes through the CPCN process. And there's a number of ways we could do this. The way the amendment's drafted, it asks the PPRP to develop, an expedited process. But the things I would consider are, whether or not we have sufficient staff in PPRP. The power plant research project that does this, the certificate, underneath the DNR. So do we have enough staff? Are we doing things in parallel? Like, because not everything has to be sequential, so you can often speed things up by moving in parallel. And the third thing is, and you'll probably hear this from the solar industry tomorrow, is where there are, specific, types of projects that go through the CPCN, can there be like a model permit for this, type of project? And so, basically the amendment would be just to, say like, hey, we're going to keep the process as it is and develop this fast track moving forward, but it would take some time. So I just kind of wanted to get the administration's, response to this potential amendment.
Yes, Senator, I appreciate the thinking behind it. I think it's a larger conversation than this bill and this specific amendment. The administration's position is that we can find ways broadly, not just in the case of backup generators, but broadly to make the many of our permitting processes more efficient while still holding the state to very high environmental and labor standards. I think that's something we need to think through, not just on the CPCN and through PPRP, but in water permitting and a host of other permits. And of course, then there's the larger multi-state conversations about interconnection in the PJM. So we're committed to that conversations. I would foresee some of that being part of the conversation in this group we've committed to convening over the interim. I would also foresee it as being an ongoing process. It's one of the reasons the administration separately introduced the Transparent Government Act, which is going to make much more transparent the timelines for all of our state permitting and licensing processes.
So that's great. I'm glad you brought that up. I actually sent you an email on this morning. Do you think that as part of that larger transparency in government, are we going to be looking at, I mean, it's all like permits. We'll be looking at the CPCN process like writ large in that high level commission? Or just the component pieces?
I think we need to.
Okay,
Yeah.
so just clarifying, so when we get to that other bill, CPCN will be part of that other bill. The last thing I was saying about in terms of speeding stuff up, I have unfortunately had to go down a rabbit hole for multiple constituents around permits.
Mhm.
And they range from well and septic permits, which are horribly slow, to opening a business in Maryland, which is fast. It's faster and cheaper in Virginia. I had lots of conversations with SStat about why that is. You know what the answer is? It's our IT system.
Mhm.
Literally, we can't do it any faster, and we can't offer multiple expedited permits for opening a business the same day in the state of Maryland because our IT system is outdated. So the email I sent you this morning was about, when we're looking at how we update all of these things, can we please look at the IT implications of having all this outdated stuff and how much that slows down things?
Absolutely. IT is a major component of it. There are other components that I think we need to look at as well.
Great.
As you know, some of the agencies have been understaffed, and that's a problem we need to work on. In some cases, regulatory and statutory language puts up unnecessary barriers that slow down the process without ensuring the kinds of outcomes that we want. So we're committed to talking through all of those things. I think the challenge is, it's deep in the weeds to get into these permitting processes, and I think a lot of policymakers in the executive branch, legislative branch, everywhere have kind of shied away from getting that deep in the weeds. But I think that's something we need to do to ensure our state is both competitive and holds ourselves to very high standards in terms of environment and labor.
Again, I'll just add that 472, the Transparency Act, is on our voting list today. So yes.
Mr. Chairman, it's a great bill.
Yes. Okay, back to you, Senator Hester.
Last one is actually at the request of the Maryland League of Conservation, who I believe are here. And so I don't know if Alexis, you could just tell us what that amendment does, and then we could hear from LCV why this last amendment is so important.
Begins on page 18. And so under these amendments, on-site backup generators are exempt from the CPCN requirements still. But those that produce at least 100 megawatts of electricity through diesel-powered sources must obtain permits for construction and install through interconnecting with either PJM or the relevant electric company energy storage that has the capacity to produce at least 1% of the capacity of the on-site generator in order to take pressure off of the electric grid. The amendment also requires MDE in consultation with Department of Natural Resources, Power Plant Research Program, and the PSC to adopt regulations undergirding the requirement. And under this one, contrary to some of the additional ones, there isn't an expedited permitting process.
Why don't you, and then let me just say, I don't want to precedent-wise, this is the governor's bill, so we've got governor's team. I'm a little reluctant to bring up advocates on a bill, an amendment that may or may not even be offered. I think that's get us into a whole other thing during voting sessions. So we don't relitigate everything, but I'll yield back to you just in terms of what you're trying to achieve here and what the issue is. That's totally legit.
Okay, so I'm thinking 20, 30 years down the road, or maybe not even that far, but we have a goal for 3,000 megawatts of energy storage. And I think it's going to become really important because as we get data centers in all of PJM, we're going to have, increased energy needs. And so what this would do is the way I tried to structure the amendment was so that they just had to get in the PJM queue, but not actually get approved for their to have a certain small percentage of battery storage that could help to protect the grid and move towards our overall state goals.
Okay, any questions, comments, thoughts? Are you offering the amendment or? Sure, Senator Augustine.
right now, Alexis, maybe you can help with this. Like, what is the timeline for getting into the queue, and all of that, and what impact that may or may not have on the viability of the project as a whole, when this is obviously kind of not really the data centers, it's something different. What would that?
I think for energy storage, at this point, it may be at least 1 year to interconnect or to enter into having energy storage installed within PJM.
Right, but then there's also just so there's that delay, but is there also the process of even just getting into the queue? I mean, you still have to go through a process in order to be able to even do that.
And let me just add, I mean, I think there would be a PJM angle. There's a utility. I mean, the
That's what I'm
utilities
saying.
have to be part of it.
All of it.
So
There's a lot
this-
of negotiation that
Correct.
goes into it before you're actually able to even present to become a part of the queue. This is it. I just think there's an unintended amount of extension of time that maybe might make it a little bit different than maybe what you're trying to accomplish. And obviously, I am a big supporter of storage and have though dealt with the challenges, oh my gosh, of trying to get it up and going and moving. And I just get concerned about it being something different than what we're dealing with on this.
Okay, let's spend a little more time on this, but again, depending on whether the amendment's being offered or not, I don't want to, but it's an important topic. So let's, Senator Washington.
So are you thinking this is something we need to think about more and that we don't have to put it in this bill? But
Oh,
you
yeah,
think it's
yeah,
something
yeah.
we can
Yeah,
look
I
at
do.
over
I just
the
don't
interim
think that
and then
this right here.
so we can
is-
be more comprehensive
Yeah.
in the approach?
I mean, I'm very much,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is something I'm
Okay.
wrestling with for
Yeah.
sure. I just don't think that this is the place for it.
And obviously, the broader topic's one that we've spent the
Right,
last
right,
year discussing. Yes, Senator Hester, back to you.
Well, you've done a lot more work in storage than I have. Where is this conversation happening? Like, how do we get to the 3,000 megawatts of storage we absolutely need? I mean, because I know there's a couple different working groups that haven't been convened.
Mhm.
I was put on the grid resiliency working group, which I think might include storage. It also was going to look at the nuclear capacity. We have enough energy generation going forward, but where specifically are we going to have the conversation about how much storage we need to make sure that we don't have rolling blackouts?
We are having it at the PSC for certain. We have a couple of pilot programs that have actually stalled, quite frankly. And that's just on some of the smaller ones. And obviously, we passed legislation last year as well to establish the goals that you're even talking about, which is a part of an ongoing conversation with the stakeholders in the PSC. But it's hard, I would say.
Is there anything the administration can do to help you out?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would appreciate getting their assistance and help with that. I mean, if you guys could commit to helping us with it, that would be fantastic. Great, thank you.
Okay, Senator Hester, we good on this amendment or not? Okay, let's take up finally Senator Lewis Young as an amendment, which Alexis, why don't you describe the amendment and then we'll.
All right, so this amendment begins on page 21. We did go over this one last week, but as a refresher, these amendments sponsored by Senator Lewis Young maintain the status of SB 474, keeps it in its current posture in terms of the CPC and exemptions, but it rolls in SB 861, which requires high energy use facilities which provide data processing or cryptocurrency processing or the cultivation of cannabis to ensure that greenhouse gas emissions are reduced 100% below baseline emissions by 2040. The goals are intermittent, so they're set for 2027, 2030, 2035, and 2040, with corresponding intervals of reductions. These amendments require local health departments to monitor air quality at a frequency that MDE requires testing a high energy use facility for backup technology during non-peak periods, requires the PSC to ensure that sufficient energy is available to avoid blackouts that require the use of emergency backup, requires a person in ownership of a high energy use facility to issue an annual report on annual greenhouse gas emissions, progress towards meeting the greenhouse gas emissions goals, a timeline for converting emergency backup to greener alternatives, a copy of relevant power purchase agreements as well. PSC may require the report to include any additional information. Also requires MDE to submit once to the General Assembly recommendations regarding high energy use facilities, including permitting recommendations. Individuals who violate any of the aforementioned mandates are subject to civil and criminal penalties under Title 13 of the Public Utilities article.
Okay, Senator Lewis Young, do you want to comment or?
Not really. I think that they've been explained accurately. Just want to explain the motivation for this. I looked at best practices around the country when I saw that there was a possibility that the CPCN process would be exempted. And the best example I found was Oregon, which now has 81 data centers looking to increase by another 10, and very high levels of pollution. They are looking to address it, but in the early years, it was a major problem. And so the concerns that I saw based on that experience motivated me to put some guardrails and better oversight and transparency on environmental concerns.
I just have one, maybe partly because I was the sponsor last year of the cannabis legalization, but I have heard from a large chunk of that industry who have great, a lot of concerns. Did you have any conversation with anybody in the cannabis growth industry in Maryland before throwing in that into this section or in bill that you had?
No, I modeled this after the Oregon legislation.
Okay, well, are you offering the amendment or not?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion from Senator Lewis Young on this set of amendments. Is there a second?
Can I ask a question?
Sure, Vice Chair Kagan.
I would love to know the governor's folks' reaction, and are there parts of this amendment that you like, dislike? If either of you could speak to that.
I think many of the issues raised by this amendment are the same issues we're expecting to discuss in the stakeholder engagement we have over the summer, and we'd prefer this not be the vehicle for this amendment.
Is there a second or a no second? Okay, a second from Senator Washington. We're going to take a roll call on this amendment.
All right, Senator Kagan.
Could I speak before I go briefly?
Sure.
I think there's some pieces of this amendment that are interesting to me and valid. The amendment as is before us, I think, is not quite ready for prime time. I'm wondering about what the chair said about cannabis, cryptocurrencies in here. There's a lot of stuff, and I think these are big issues, and I'm not sure this is ready to go. So for that reason, I will vote no on the amendment.
Senator Kagan, no. Senator Augustine. Senator Augustine, no. Senator Gallion. Senator Gallion, no. Senator Watson. Senator Watson, no. Senator Lewis Young.
Yes.
Senator Lewis Young, yes. Senator Brooks. No. Senator Brooks, no. Senator Carozza. No. Senator Carozza, no. Senator Hester. Senator Hester, no. Senator Washington.
No is similar to the vice chairs. There's a lot of good issues. I seconded it because I wanted a part of the record, but this isn't the vehicle, so but.
Senator Simon-Ayer. Senator Simon-Ayer, no. Senator Felton.
No, that amendment fails on a 10-1 vote, which brings us back to the bill with the amendments we have adopted. Any further discussion or a motion from anybody here? We've got Senator Augustine has moved the bill as amended, a second from Senator Washington. Lemoria, let's take a roll call. Oh, yes, absolutely. Discussion. Yes.
Okay, no one else is going to go. I'll lead off. First, I want to thank the governor's folks, and I want to thank Ross Seidman in the president's office. I want to thank the president. I want to thank the chair and all the advocates on all sides and all pieces of this bill. I think the data centers, as I think Senator Hester said, I think they're coming. I think we want them. I think we want the jobs, the prestige, the revenue, the access. I think all of that makes total sense. I have been pretty clear about some of my concerns about this bill, and taking the Public Service Commission out of the process gives us less transparency, less accountability, and that worries me. There are people who have given information that does make me worry about rolling blackouts and access to, for our constituents, to reliable power. And then lastly, I think this sets up a precedent that worries me. And I wonder how we tell the next folks coming in the door that, nope, we're not going to do it for you, but you did it for them. And so I worry about all of those. Late President Miller used to totally mangle what I say all the time, which is perfect is the enemy of the good. I have a lot of concerns about this. I'm going to support my governor. I'm going to support the economic development aspects, but I really need to be on the record having grave concerns. And I will be interested to see Mr. Lutke, Mr. Ratul. I will be interested to see what the work group comes up with and whether this body might need to do some tweaking next year. But for now, I will support the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so is that a yes, because you were the first on the roll
It
call
was
there?
debate if there was.
Okay.
I needed to speak.
Any further discussion on the bill, Senator Lewis Young, before we take a vote?
Yeah. I want to be clear. I support data centers as well. They're coming. Maryland wants a piece of the business. For the most part, what I've seen, most of the supporters are focused on the economic argument. I'm concerned the numbers are very inflated. When you do an economic analysis, you need to look at the costs as well as the revenues. Those haven't been accurately quantified yet. Since these data centers are going to be in my community, I am particularly concerned about oversight, transparency, air quality, and the kinds of things that affect the lives of the citizens of my community, the air the children breathe, and there's no amount of money that can balance not having the proper guardrails in place. So while this bill has come a long way, we have a further path to go. The Frederick County came out with a work group report. I'm sorry to say it's a bit sketchy. I hope we'll do much better, but until I see better, I'm not comfortable with it. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to Senator Hester and then Senator Washington.
I also want to say that I have, concerns about the precedent that this sets. I mean, we've now got critical infrastructure defined as hospitals and data centers. Hopefully that's just for the purposes of this chapter, but we will have other people lining up. And so what that points to is the bigger need to fix government. Like if the CPCN process is not working, we absolutely have to fix it, because right now it's, slowing our solar companies down. And so I really look forward to working with the governor's office, on this. I think for me, the energy issue with the amount of electrification that we're doing, and the amount of data centers coming in the whole territory. I mean, it just puts the need for energy and clean energy and renewable energy even further forward on our agenda, because it's really important. However, that said, I have 7 bills on artificial intelligence this year. And so hopefully they will all pass, but artificial intelligence, is what is driving these data centers. And so this is the world we live in, and there are no walls around Maryland for greenhouse gases or other emissions. And so we need to figure out a way to do this. And I look forward to working with the governor's office to be part of the solution. But we really need to we need to take the energy issue seriously. And I know the president of the Senate is committed to, supporting us with the resources to make sure that our energy policy comes together. So with that, I will support the bill.
Thank you, Senator. And Senator Washington, you're going to have the last word because we have
Yes, I will.
floor in 10
I
minutes and we
understand.
need to take a vote.
It's my last words are that I strongly endorse the comments of Senator Kagan, of Senator Lewis Young, of Senator Fry Hester, and reiterate all the concerns about transparency, not changing the game for particular actors, but at the same time recognizing that we do need to do something now. And so I just basically want to be on record with everything that they've said and look forward to next steps. Thank you.
Okay, let's take the vote on the motion on the bill 474 as amended. Lamorian.
All right, Senator Kagan,
Aye.
Senator Kagan, yes. Senator Augustine,
Yes.
Senator Augustine, yes. Senator Gallion,
Yes.
Senator Gallion, yes. Senator Watson, Senator Watson, yes. Senator Lewis Young, Senator Lewis Young, no. Senator Brooks,
Yes.
Senator Brooks, yes. Senator Carosa,
Yes.
Senator Carosa, yes. Senator Hester,
Yes.
Senator Hester, yes. Senator Washington,
Yes.
Senator Washington, yes. Senator Simoneer,
Yes.
Senator Simoneer, yes. Senator Feldman,
Yes, that bill carries, Senate Bill 474 as amended carries 10-1. And with that, our work is done for this morning. See everybody on the floor in